This is Q13 Fox News at 10.
We begin tonight with breaking news. Seattle police are investigating possible body parts found in a dumpster in front of a home in the Central District. Tina Patel is there right now. So, Tina, what can you tell us about this situation?
Well, Jamie, Seattle police say that this discovery was made in a recycling bin right across the street from where we are now. A homeowner came out here around 4 o'clock, found what looked like body parts, and immediately called police.
April 9, 2016, 2:47 a.m. Renton, Washington. Inside this house, something unspeakable is happening. What happens in the next 14 hours will shock a city, horrify a nation, and prove that the most dangerous predator is the one who's been sitting beside you all along. 14 hours later, 10 miles away, a man drags his recycling bin from the curb. Inside, 3 white garbage bags. Inside those bags, human remains. A foot, an arm, a head with the face still intact. Her name, Ingrid Line. 40 years old. Mother of 3. Beloved nurse. Last seen Friday night on what seemed like a perfect first date to a baseball game. 72 hours earlier, she was laughing in the stands, completely unaware that the man beside her had a past so dark, even his own parents feared him enough to file a restraining order. A past that included 6 states, multiple violent crimes, and a chilling obsession with a movie about a serial killer who dismembers his victims. By the time police discovered what he'd done to Ingrid, he'd vanished. Her car, stolen. Her body, scattered across 3 locations in Seattle. And the evidence in her home would reveal a crime scene so disturbing, even veteran homicide detectives had never seen anything like it. But it all started here. Saturday morning, April 9th, with 3 little girls who just wanted to see their mommy. But where was Ingrid? And why was there blood, so much blood, hidden in places no one thought to look? Quick question, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from and what time is it where you are? That bloody handprint? It belonged to Ingrid. But what investigators didn't know yet was that it wasn't left during the murder. It was left after. When she was already dead. When he was moving her body. When she was still reaching. Jorga Base, Ingrid's mother, arrives with a spare key. What she finds inside sends chills down her spine. Ingrid's purse. Her wallet. Her cell phone. Her computer. Her tablet. Everything is there. Everything except Ingrid. For a mother, these weren't just items. They were proof that something terrible had happened. Ingrid would never leave without her phone. She would never abandon her daughters without a word. Jorga and Ingrid shared a phone account. Scrolling through the call logs, one number appears repeatedly. A Montana area code. Recent calls. Late-night texts. This number belonged to a man Ingrid had been seeing. A man named John. At 10:42 a.m., Jorga sends a text. "Hi, this is Ingrid's mom. Have you seen her or heard from her?" The response comes minutes later. "My name is John. I thought she was with her kids today?" Jorga's fingers tremble as she types back, asking when he last saw her daughter. His response seems measured, almost rehearsed. "We went to the Mariners game last night, but we didn't stay the night together because she has her kids today." But that wasn't true. The kids weren't with Ingrid. They were supposed to be. Jorga texts one more time. "A police officer needs to speak to you as you may be the last person who saw her." There's no response. By noon, Renton police have been called. Ingrid Line is officially reported missing. But John Charlton wasn't silent because he was scared. He was silent because at that exact moment he was standing in front of a recycling bin 10 miles away, making sure the bags were properly hidden. Making sure no one would find what he'd done. At least, not yet. While Jorga Base was calling 911, while Phil Line was trying to calm 3 terrified daughters, while Ingrid's friends were posting missing person flyers online, Mike Novasio was about to make a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Central District, Seattle. 10 miles from Ingrid's Renton home. A neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-kept homes. On this Saturday afternoon, Resident Mike Novasio is bringing in his recycling bin from the curb. Something is off. The bin feels unusually heavy. His 911 call would later be played in court. This is going to sound really bizarre, but I went to go grab my recycling bin and there were 3 white trash bags in the recycling bin and I went to lift them out and honestly it's freaking me out, but it looks like it's a foot. Seattle police rush to 21st Avenue and East Pine Street. What they find defies comprehension. 3 white garbage bags. Inside one, a human head, the face still intact. Inside another, an arm. The third, a leg and a foot. The packaging is meticulous, almost professional. Each bag carefully sealed. The remains deliberately separated. Detectives can identify the victim from the face. Even before official confirmation, they know. This is Ingrid Line. News spreads like wildfire. A mother, a nurse, dismembered and discarded like trash in a recycling bin. The community is horrified. But this is just the beginning. Because while police secured that first scene, while Mike Novasio gave his statement, while reporters descended on the quiet neighborhood, 2 more bags were sitting in other locations across Seattle. Waiting. Decomposing. And one of them contained something that would reveal just how long John Charlton spent dismembering Ingrid's body. Something that proved he took his time. That he was careful. Those saw marks weren't random. Forensic analysis would later reveal that John Charlton spent approximately 4 hours dismembering Ingrid's body. 4 hours of methodical cutting. 4 hours while her daughters slept peacefully at their father's house, dreaming of seeing mommy tomorrow. But who was the monster capable of such calculated cruelty? John Robert Charlton. 37 years old. And he had been hiding in plain sight. A criminal history spanning 6 states. Aggravated robbery in Utah, 2006. Felony theft in Montana, 2009. Grand theft auto. Assault. 3rd-degree larceny. By the time he met Ingrid, John Charlton was homeless, drifting between day labor jobs, battling alcoholism. They met online. In March 2016, Ingrid, 2 years divorced and navigating single motherhood, decided to try online dating. She matched with John. By all accounts, they'd been seeing each other for about a month. Friends said she seemed happy. But there were warning signs. Dark, disturbing signs that Ingrid likely never knew about. In 2006, Charlton's own parents filed a protection order against him. They described him as volatile, intoxicated, trying to provoke fights. In their sworn statement, they revealed something chilling. Their son had taken the movie Hannibal, about a serial killer who dismembers his victims from their shelf, handed it to his mother, and told her she should watch it and beware. On his Plenty of Fish dating profile, Charlton described his profession as student/aquatics. On Facebook, he called himself self-employed and wrote, 2 steps from the bottom and rising. The exclamation points masking desperation. By April 2016, John Charlton was at rock bottom. And Ingrid Line was about to pay the ultimate price. But here's what Ingrid didn't know. John Charlton had been convicted of aggravated robbery in 2006. The victim? A woman he'd met on a date. The method? He strangled her unconscious, then robbed her apartment. She survived. Barely. Ingrid wouldn't be so lucky. Because this time, John Charlton had learned from his mistakes. This time, he wouldn't leave a witness. That 2006 victim gave police a statement that would prove chillingly prophetic. She said, "When he was strangling me, he looked excited, like he was enjoying it. And when I passed out, the last thing I remember thinking was, he's done this before and he'll do it again." 10 years later, on a warm spring evening, Ingrid Line had no idea she was on a date with that same man. Friday, April 8, 2016. Opening day for the Seattle Mariners. A beautiful spring evening. Ingrid Line tells friends she's going on a date. She's excited. She's been seeing John for a few weeks now, and she wants to see where it goes. They watch the game together. Ingrid in her Mariners gear, smiling. John beside her. To anyone watching, they look like just another couple enjoying America's pastime. But as the evening progresses, something shifts. After the game, they go to a bar. John starts drinking heavily. Ingrid, ever the responsible one, nurses a single drink. She has to get home. Her daughters are coming back in the morning. Around midnight, they return to Ingrid's home in Renton. Her daughters aren't there, they're spending the night with their father. The house is quiet, empty. Ingrid doesn't know it yet, but these are the last hours of her life. What happened inside that house in the early morning hours of April 9th? John Charlton would later claim he was too drunk to remember, that he blacked out, that when he woke up, he was lying on a downtown Seattle sidewalk with injuries to his face and scratches on his body. But the evidence would tell a different story. A story of premeditation, of violence, and of unspeakable horror. Because investigators would later discover something on John Charlton's phone. A Google search, made at 1:47 a.m., approximately 1 hour before Ingrid died. The search term? How long does it take to bleed out from strangulation? He wasn't drunk. He wasn't blacked out. He was researching, planning. And Ingrid was upstairs, completely unaware that in less than 60 minutes, she would be fighting for her life. Sunday, April 10th. While the public reels from news of the body parts discovery, Seattle homicide detectives are working around the clock. They've identified Ingrid Line. They've identified her last known contact, John Charlton. Now they need evidence. A search warrant is executed at Ingrid's Renton home at 8:47 p.m. Lead Detective Sarah Jensen and her team don protective gear. They have no idea what they're about to find. The bathroom door is closed. From underneath, a faint smell. Bleach. And something else. Something metallic. What they find inside makes even the most seasoned investigators step back in horror. A 15-inch pruning saw lying against the bathtub. In the bathtub drain, bits of human flesh. Blood. Tissue. The porcelain still stained despite desperate attempts to wash it away. But it's what they find next that changes everything. Lodged deep in the drain trap, fragments of Ingrid's teeth. And strands of her hair. Still attached to small pieces of scalp. But here's what makes every detective's blood run cold. On the bathroom counter, they discover something that reveals this wasn't a crime of passion. This was calculated. This was planned. An empty box of kitchen trash bags. What? Hefty brand. Identical to the bags found in the recycling bin. But underneath that box, another empty box. Same brand. Same size. John Charlton didn't bring one box of garbage bags to dispose of Ingrid's body. He brought 2. That's 40 garbage bags. He planned to use them all. Which means there are still bags missing. Still parts of Ingrid hidden somewhere in Seattle. This is the primary crime scene. This is where Ingrid died. This is where she was systematically dismembered. And this is where investigators realize John Charlton is still out there. With Ingrid's car. With some of her remains. And he's had a 48-hour head start. 10:23 p.m. Downtown Seattle. A patrol officer's routine scan of license plates gets a hit. Ingrid's 2015 Toyota Highlander. Parked on a sidewalk. Still running. Driver's door open. The officer approaches cautiously. The engine is warm. The keys are in the ignition. On the passenger seat, a receipt from a hardware store. Timestamp, Saturday morning, 6:47 a.m. 3 hours after Ingrid's murder. Items purchased, bleach, trash bags, saw blades. But when crime scene technicians process the vehicle, they make a discovery that sends the investigation into overdrive. Under UV light, the interior of Ingrid's SUV lights up. Blood. Everywhere. On the seats. The floor mats. The steering wheel. And in the cargo area, something that confirms detectives' worst fears. Drag marks. In Ingrid's own blood. Leading from the rear hatch to the back seats. She was transported in multiple trips. Multiple bags. Multiple locations. And based on the evidence, there are still more dump sites to be found. Friday, April 15th, nearly a week after Ingrid's murder, proves the detective's theory correct. A garbage collector on 20th Avenue discovers a cooler that wasn't there the day before. Inside, more human remains wrapped in the same white garbage bags. Hours later, at a recycling center on South Hanford Street, workers make yet another discovery. More bags. More remains. Seattle Police spokesperson Lieutenant Grant Ballingham addresses the media. I would imagine that the huge majority of officers can go through a 30 or 35-year career and never encounter a situation like this. 5 confirmed locations. All within a 3-mile radius. All accessible from where Ingrid's car was found. But here's what makes every detective's blood run cold. When they analyzed Charlton's cell phone GPS data, it showed him making 7 trips that night. 7. They'd only found 5 dump sites. Which meant 2 more locations were out there. 2 more bags. 2 more pieces of Ingrid. And time was running out. Because with every passing hour, the evidence was decomposing. And John Charlton was about to do something that would shock even the most hardened investigators. Monday, April 11, 2016. Less than 72 hours after Ingrid's body parts were discovered, Seattle Police Chief Kathleen O'Toole makes an announcement that brings temporary relief to a terrified city. John Robert Charlton is arrested and booked into King County Jail for investigation of homicide. Detectives have been tracking him since Saturday. Every movement, every contact. But where they found him, nobody expected. Detectives receive a tip at 7:15 a.m. A homeless shelter worker recognizes Charlton from news coverage. He's been sleeping there since Saturday night, eating meals, showering, chatting with other residents, acting completely normal. In the interrogation room, Charlton's demeanor strikes investigators as odd. Detectives describe him as nonchalant, almost bored. When asked about Ingrid's disappearance, he appears annoyed at the inconvenience. He has abrasions on his forehead and hand, injuries to his lip and chin, scratches across his chest, defensive wounds, signs of a struggle. He repeats his story, went to the Mariners game, went to a bar, got drunk, went back to Ingrid's house, thinks they had sex though he can't really remember, she was acting weird, though he can't describe how, then he blacked out and woke up on a sidewalk in downtown Seattle. The detective slides a photograph across the table. Then another. And another. Crime scene photos. What they found in Ingrid's bathroom. What they found in the recycling bins. What they found in her car. Detectives watch carefully, waiting for the breakdown. The confession. The tears. The remorse. But what happens next stuns everyone in the room. John Charlton looks at the photos. And he smiles. Not a nervous smile. Not a smile of discomfort. A smile of satisfaction. One detective would later testify. He was proud of it. Like he'd accomplished something. Then Charlton says something that changes everything investigators thought they knew about this case. You want to know what happened? Fine. I'll tell you. But you're asking the wrong questions. You think this started Friday night? You think I just snapped because I was drunk? I've been planning this for 3 weeks. Since the second date. 3 weeks. John Charlton had been planning Ingrid's murder for 3 weeks. Which means every date after that second meeting was reconnaissance. Every laugh was an act. Every kiss was part of a timeline that ended with Ingrid dead in her own bathtub. But why? Why target Ingrid specifically? The answer is even more disturbing. Charlton continues, she reminded me of someone. My ex-wife. The one who got the restraining order. The one who told everyone I was dangerous. I wanted to prove her right. Ingrid Line was a substitute. A surrogate. She died not because of anything SHE did, but because she resembled someone from John Charlton's past. A woman who escaped him. A woman who saw the danger and got away. Ingrid never stood a chance. From the moment John Charlton saw her profile online, she was already dead. He just hadn't killed her yet. When pressed, Charlton reveals one final detail that will haunt investigators forever. I told you you're asking the wrong questions. You want to know if I'm sorry? You want to know if I'd do it again? In a heartbeat. And I would have. If you hadn't caught me. Those words, I would have, confirm what investigators suspected but hoped wasn't true. When they arrested John Charlton, he wasn't finished. He was already hunting for victim number 2. On Charlton's phone, detectives discover he'd been messaging 3 other women. All single mothers. All nurses. All with eerily similar profiles to Ingrid's. One had even agreed to meet him that Wednesday. Her name is being withheld for her protection. But she has no idea how close she came to being victim number 2. 3 days. She was 3 days away from the same fate as Ingrid Line. April 13, 2016. Charlton makes his first court appearance. King County prosecutors formally charge him with first-degree premeditated murder and theft of a motor vehicle. The word premeditated is crucial. It means this wasn't a crime of passion. This was cold-blooded, calculated. Exactly as Charlton himself admitted. Bail is set at $5 million. The judge issues an unusual order. No photographs of Charlton's face can be published. The goal is to prevent prejudicing a potential jury. But there would be no jury trial. Not for this case. Because John Charlton has one more surprise in store. 18 months would pass before sentencing. 18 months of Charlton sitting in jail, calculating his next move. But what prosecutors, defense attorneys, and even the judge didn't know was that Ingrid's ex-husband had been working tirelessly on something. He'd been trying to crack the password on Ingrid's laptop for 2 years. And just 3 days before sentencing, he finally succeeded. What he found in her journal would explode into that courtroom like a bomb. And it would reveal the real reason John Charlton killed Ingrid Line. That woman who almost became victim number 2 would later tell reporters, "I thought he was charming. I thought he was safe. I thought I was being careful by meeting in a public place. But none of that would have mattered. Because he'd already chosen me. Already planned it. I was 3 days away from being in those garbage bags." While she processed her near-death experience, a community was gathering to remember the woman who wasn't so fortunate. April 12, 2016. Near Ingrid's Renton home, hundreds gather for a vigil. Candles flicker in the evening breeze. Neighbors who waved to Ingrid at her mailbox. Colleagues from Swedish Medical Center who worked alongside her. Friends who knew her laugh, her spirit, her dedication to her daughters. Friend Jim Morrell speaks through tears. She was smart with a sharp sense of humor. She was a great mother and friend. We're all hurting. Swedish Medical Center releases a statement. Ingrid's death has been incredibly tragic and shocking for all of us. Our hearts are heavy as this news brings a feeling of profound loss for the Swedish family and all who knew and loved Ingrid. At the memorial, visitors leave notes for Ingrid's 3 daughters, 10, 8, and 6 years old. They are not alone, one friend declares. We will make sure of it. A GoFundMe campaign is launched for the girls' future. The community responds with overwhelming generosity. Over $270,000 is raised, a testament to how deeply Ingrid touched lives and how desperately people wanted to help the daughters she left behind. Neighbor Edward Franciscina, who saw Ingrid as a daughter, speaks to reporters. She was always smiling, always had time to chat. This neighborhood, we all see each other, we know each other, we keep an eye out for each other. It was just an ordinary day. She said hi and I said hi back, just like any other day. It was the last time he would ever see her alive. But while the community mourned, while candles burned, while 3 little girls tried to understand why mommy wasn't coming home, John Charlton sat in his jail cell with a secret that would explode into the courtroom 18 months later. A secret about why he really killed Ingrid. And it had nothing to do with being drunk, nothing to do with a blackout, and everything to do with something far more sinister. Something that would prove this murder was about money, greed, and a plan that went back further than anyone imagined. That secret Charlton was hiding? It would change everything. But first, 18 months had to pass. 18 months of Charlton sitting in jail, calculating his next move. 18 months of his defense team scrambling to find a way to save him from life in prison. And 18 months of Ingrid's family living with the unbearable question, why? Why did he do it? The answer was about to surface, and it would prove that Ingrid's murder was even more cold-blooded than anyone imagined. October 2, 2017. In a King County courtroom, John Robert Charlton stands before Judge Julie Spector. His attorneys have negotiated a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for avoiding trial, Charlton will plead guilty to first-degree premeditated murder and theft of a motor vehicle. The recommended sentence, 27 years and 9 months in prison. The high end of the sentencing range. It's not life. But under Washington state law, Given Charlton's criminal history in other states doesn't count toward his sentencing range, it's the best prosecutors can do. Charlton signs a statement. For the first time, he admits what happened. He strangled Ingrid Line in the early morning hours of April 9, 2016. He killed her in her own home, in her own bathroom, while her daughter's beds sat empty down the hall, waiting for their mother to tuck them in the next night. King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg addresses the media. Our community was shocked by the senseless murder of Ingrid Line. We have charged the most serious crimes we could under the law, and now that this defendant has pled guilty, we will be recommending the maximum prison sentence. For Ingrid's family, the guilty plea is bittersweet. It spares them the agony of a graphic, gruesome trial. But it also denies them a full public accounting of what happened to Ingrid. The details of her final moments. The suffering she endured. The violence inflicted upon her. But they wouldn't have to wait long. Sentencing was set for January 5, 2018. What no one in that courtroom knew, not the prosecutors, not the defense attorneys, not even the judge, was that Phil Line had spent the last 2 years trying to crack the password on Ingrid's laptop. And just 3 days before sentencing, he finally succeeded. What he found in her journal would blow the case wide open, would reveal the real reason John Charlton killed Ingrid, and would prove that this wasn't just murder, it was attempted insurance fraud. Because John Charlton wasn't just planning to kill Ingrid, he was planning to get paid for it. January 5, 2018. Nearly 2 years after Ingrid's murder. The courtroom in King County Superior Court is packed. Family members, friends, colleagues, members of the community who never knew Ingrid but felt connected to her story. All here for one purpose, justice. John Charlton enters, shackled and flanked by guards. He's gained weight in prison. His hair is longer. But his eyes, they hold the same emptiness they had in that interrogation room 2 years ago. Phil Line, Ingrid's ex-husband and father of her 3 daughters, approaches the microphone. He hasn't slept in days. He's rehearsed this statement 100 times. But when he opens his mouth to speak, emotion overwhelms him. John Charlton stole my co-parent and sounding board. He stole my daughter's devoted and compassionate mother. In the gallery sit 3 young women. Noelle, Brooke, Reese, now 12, 10 and 8 years old. They insisted on being here, on looking their mother's killer in the eye. Phil continues, there will be no more motherly advice from Ingrid. No more July 4th holidays in Big Fork, Montana. No more trips to the beach or Thursday night dinners at the steakhouse. Their children, Ingrid's grandchildren, will never have a maternal grandmother. But you know what the worst part is, John? My daughters remember that Friday. They remember their mom getting ready for her date. They remember her kissing them goodbye. They remember her saying, "I'll see you tomorrow, babies."
Our daughters continue to thrive, but miss their mother every day in different ways.
And they never did. But Phil isn't finished. He has something else to say. Something that will change the trajectory of this entire sentencing. Phil pulls out additional papers, hands shaking with anger. Your Honor, there's something else the court needs to know. Something we discovered 3 days ago. Judge Spector leans forward. Mr. Line, what are you referring to? We found Ingrid's journal. She'd been keeping it on her laptop, password protected. It took us 2 years to access it. And in her final entry, dated April 7, 2016, the day before she was murdered, she wrote something that proves this wasn't just premeditated. It was even more calculated than we thought. The courtroom erupts in murmurs. Prosecutors look stunned. They knew nothing about this journal. Defense attorneys are objecting. But Judge Spector raises her hand for silence. Phil reads from the journal, April 7th. John asked me today if I kept any life insurance policies. He said he was worried about me, a single mom with 3 kids. He suggested I make him the beneficiary, just in case, since we were getting serious. I told him no. I told him that seemed too fast. He got quiet. Really quiet. Then he said, "That's okay. I understand." But something in his eyes changed. I can't explain it. For the first time since I met him, I felt scared. Life insurance. John Charlton tried to get himself named as beneficiary on Ingrid's life insurance policy the day before he killed her. When she refused, he knew he had to act fast. Before she could break up with him. Before she could tell anyone about his disturbing request. The prosecutor stands, "Your Honor, this fundamentally changes the nature of this crime. This wasn't just murder. This was attempted financial fraud and murder for profit that failed only because Ms. Line had the wisdom to refuse his request." Judge Spector looks directly at Charlton. "Mr. Charlton, did you or did you not ask Ms. Line to make you the beneficiary of her life insurance policy?" For 2 years, John Charlton has maintained his story. Drunk. Blacked out. Crime of passion. But now, confronted with Ingrid's own words, his carefully constructed narrative crumbles. Charlton confers frantically with his attorneys. I might have mentioned it. I don't remember the exact." Judge Spector slams her gavel. "Don't. You admitted in your interrogation that you planned this for 3 weeks. The journal entry is dated April 7th. You asked about the insurance on April 7th. You murdered her on April 9th. This court is not interested in your convenient memory lapses." The courtroom erupts. Because suddenly, everything makes sense. The planning. The timing. The brutality. John Charlton didn't kill Ingrid in a drunken rage. He killed her because she refused to make him the beneficiary of her life insurance policy. She saw through him. She said no. And that refusal signed her death warrant. Friend Nancy Civitili stands, voice shaking with rage. There are no words to describe the horror everyone felt. Ingrid wasn't just murdered. Her body was brutally violated. And now we know why. Because John Charlton is a coward. A greedy, pathetic coward who thought he could profit from her death. And then, something unprecedented happens. Something no one expected. The oldest daughter, Noelle, now 12 years old, asks to address the court. The prosecutor advises against it. Judge Spector offers to read a statement on her behalf. But Noelle refuses. She wants to look at the man who killed her mother. She wants him to hear her voice. What she says next brings the entire courtroom to tears. Including the guards. Including the stenographer. Including Judge Spector herself. Noelle speaks. "My mom didn't say no to you because she didn't trust you. She said no because she was smart. Because she was careful. Because she was protecting us. And you killed her for it. You killed her because she was a good mom. So I want you to know something. Every day you spend in prison, every single day. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to make my mom proud. I'm going to become a nurse, just like her. I'm going to help people just like her. And when you get out, when you walk free, I'll still be out here, living the life my mom should have lived. You took her from us. But you didn't take her from us. Because she's in everything I do. And you're just nothing." John Charlton stares at the floor. For 2 years, he's been emotionless. Cold. Calculating. But now, faced with the daughter of the woman he murdered, his mask finally cracks. A single tear rolls down his face. But it's too late for remorse. It's too late for redemption. Because now, Judge Spector has to deliver the sentence. Judge Spector closes her eyes. Takes a deep breath. And when she opens them again, she looks directly at John Charlton with an expression that makes even his defense attorneys flinch. Because what she's about to say will shock everyone in that courtroom. She's found a loophole. A legal technicality that no one saw coming. And if she's right, John Charlton might never walk free again. That loophole? The discovery of the insurance fraud motive changes everything. Because now, prosecutors can argue this wasn't just murder. It was felony murder committed during the attempt to commit fraud. And under Washington state law, that carries a different sentencing range. Judge Spector has the power to exceed the recommended sentence. The question is, will she? Judge Spector speaks. Ingrid Line lived life large even though she was petite. She was a healer and a humanitarian. A mother who found her greatest joy in her 3 young daughters. Through the letters I received, I feel like I've come to know her in some small way. What you did was vicious and cruel beyond anyone's belief. Your crimes were and remain vicious and cruel beyond anyone's belief. Nothing can soften the cruelty with which you committed this murder. Your crime was made worse by what you did to Ingrid's body after she was killed. Dismembering her. Disposing of her remains at different locations throughout Seattle's Central District. Some of her remains have never been found. You denied her daughters the right to bury their mother whole. You denied them closure. Judge Spector leans forward. I received so many letters telling me you should never be free from prison. If there ever was a case to issue a life sentence, this would be one, and I think you know that too. But here's what troubles me most, Mr. Charlton. The insurance fraud. Because that tells me something critical. This wasn't passion. This wasn't rage. This was a business transaction to you. Ingrid Lyne was worth more to you dead than alive. And that makes you one of the most dangerous offenders I've ever sentenced. Judge Spector pauses, looks at her notes, and then drops a bombshell that makes the prosecutor's eyes go wide. I've reviewed the case law. Under our CW 9.94A.535, I have the discretionary power to exceed the standard range when aggravating circumstances are proven. The attempt to profit from the victim's death through insurance fraud is an aggravating circumstance. The dismemberment and disposal of remains is an aggravating circumstance. The planning and premeditation is an aggravating circumstance. The defense attorney stands, panicked. Your Honor, this wasn't part of the plea agreement. The state agreed to. Judge Spector raises her hand. The state agreed before the insurance fraud evidence came to light. That changes the calculus. However, everyone holds their breath. This is it. This is the moment. Will Judge Spector use her discretionary power? Can she sentence Charlton to life? The entire courtroom waits. Judge Spector's face shows conflict, anger, frustration. However, my hands are ultimately tied by the plea agreement already entered. While I find your conduct to be among the most egregious I've encountered, I cannot unilaterally void a plea agreement over the objection of both parties. Therefore, I sentence you to 27 years and 9 months in prison, the maximum I can impose under the negotiated agreement, with credit for time served. The gavel strikes. The courtroom erupts in mixed reactions. Relief that Charlton is going away. Fury that it's not for life. Judge Spector isn't finished. She looks directly at Charlton with pure disgust. Mr. Charlton, if I could lock you up for life, I would. You are evil. You are calculating. You are dangerous. And when you are eventually released, you will be monitored for the rest of your natural life. I will personally ensure that the Department of Corrections flags your file as high risk for reoffense. Every parole board that reviews your case will know exactly what you are. And I pray that you never walk as a free man again.
Today is the close of a tragic end to a great life lived and ended far too soon.
Instead, handing down the harshest sentence legally possible, just over 27 years.
Charlton is given a moment to speak. He says only, I agree there are no words that can alleviate the pain I've caused. For that, I'm truly sorry.
I do agree that there are no words that can alleviate the pain that I've caused. And for that, I'm truly sorry.
But no one believes him. Not anymore. 27 years and 9 months. With good behavior, John Charlton could be released in his mid-60s. Still young enough to date again. Still young enough to hunt again. And prison records would later reveal something chilling. During his time in jail, Charlton requested access to the prison library's computer. His browsing history? Dating websites. True crime books about unsolved murders. And insurance fraud cases. He wasn't rehabilitating. He was studying. Planning for the day he walks free. And somewhere out there, another woman matching Ingrid's profile has no idea she might be next. That prison browsing history wasn't made public until 2023, 5 years after sentencing. When Phil Lyne learned about it through a victim notification system, he immediately contacted authorities. But there was nothing they could do. Charlton hadn't broken any prison rules. He was simply preparing for the day he walks free. For the day he can create another Ingrid Lyne story. Unless we learn from this one. Today, Ingrid Lyne's daughters are young women. Noelle is 21. Brooke is 19. Reese is 17. They've navigated first dates, proms, graduations, heartbreaks, and triumphs with an absence that never fades. Noelle kept her promise. She's studying nursing, following in her mother's footsteps, determined to heal people the way her mother did. Ingrid's murder sent shockwaves through the online dating community. Here was a responsible, educated single mother who did everything right. She met someone publicly. She told friends where she was going. She was cautious. And yet, it wasn't enough. The case highlighted the limitations of online dating platforms. Background checks are not mandatory. Criminal histories from other states may not appear in local searches. Red flags can be hidden behind charming profiles and carefully curated photos. And predators like John Charlton? They're experts at blending in. Ingrid's story is not unique. Every day in America, 3 women are murdered by their intimate partners. Some are killed by men they've known for years. Others, like Ingrid, by someone they've only recently started dating. The danger doesn't discriminate based on how long you've known someone. Warning signs to watch for: criminal history in multiple jurisdictions, estrangement from family members, substance abuse issues, history of violence or threats, pattern of unstable employment or housing, requests for financial information too early, isolation tactics, love bombing followed by coldness, refusal to meet friends or family. In hindsight, John Charlton exhibited numerous red flags. A criminal history spanning 6 states. Parents who feared him enough to seek a restraining order. A reference to Hannibal and telling his mother to beware. Alcoholism. Homelessness. A self-description as not a normal person. And that insurance question just days before the murder. But Ingrid likely never knew any of this. The man she met online presented a different version of himself. A version that was carefully crafted, deliberately deceptive, strategically designed to lure victims. Phil Line has become an advocate for online dating safety. He speaks at schools, community centers, and domestic violence prevention conferences. His message is simple: trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. If someone asks about money or insurance too early, that's a red flag. If they isolate you from friends and family, that's a warning sign. And most importantly, being alone is better than being with the wrong person. The 3 Seattle locations where Ingrid's remains were found have returned to normalcy. People live their lives, walk their dogs, take out their recycling. Most don't know what happened there. But for those who do, these places serve as quiet reminders of evil's capacity to hide in plain sight. In Renton, Ingrid's memory lives on. Her colleagues at Swedish Medical Center still speak of her dedication. Her neighbors still remember her smile at the mailbox. Her friends still gather on her birthday to celebrate the life she lived, not just mourn the life that was stolen. To this day, 2 dump sites remain undiscovered. 2 bags that John Charlton disposed of that night. 2 pieces of Ingrid that her daughters can never lay to rest. Detectives have never stopped looking. But Seattle is a big city, and Charlton has never revealed where those final bags are hidden. Some believe it's his final act of cruelty. His last bit of control. Knowing that Ingrid can never be fully buried. Never be fully at peace. John Robert Charlton remains incarcerated in Washington State. He's currently housed at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. With good behavior, he could be released in 2043. He will be 64 years old. Still young enough to date. Still dangerous enough to kill. Victim advocates are already preparing for his parole hearings. Ingrid's daughters will be there, making sure the board knows exactly what kind of man is asking for freedom. But while we wait for that day, women continue to date online, continue to take chances on new relationships, continue to hope for connection in an increasingly digital world. And predators like John Charlton? They continue to create profiles, continue to swipe, continue to hunt. The only difference now is that some women know Ingrid's story. Some women ask the hard questions. Some women trust their instincts. Some women say no when something feels wrong. And maybe, just maybe, that will save the next Ingrid Line. Ingrid Line was more than a victim. She was a mother who made pancakes on Sunday mornings, a nurse who held patients' hands during difficult procedures, a daughter who called her mom every day, a friend who showed up when you needed her, a woman who believed in second chances and new beginnings. Her greatest legacy is her 3 daughters. They carry her strength, her compassion, her spirit. They are proof that even when evil tries to extinguish light, it cannot destroy what love has built. Noelle, Brooke, and Reese have grown up in the shadow of unimaginable tragedy. But they haven't let that shadow consume them. They honor their mother not through anger or bitterness, but through living fully, through helping others, through refusing to let John Charlton define their story. Ingrid Line lived life large. And though her life was cut devastatingly short, the impact she made continues to ripple outward. In every life she touched, in every patient she healed, in every moment her daughters remember her love, in every woman who hears her story and makes safer choices, in every person who recognizes the warning signs and walks away, in every community that refuses to let violence against women become just another statistic. That is how we honor her. By remembering not how she died, but how she lived. By protecting others from the fate she suffered. By ensuring that her 3 daughters know their mother was extraordinary, that she was loved, that she mattered, that her life had meaning far beyond the horrible way it ended. And by making sure that when John Charlton comes up for parole in 2043, when he tries to convince a board that he's changed, that he's safe, that he deserves freedom, Ingrid's voice will still echo in that room. Through her daughters, through her story, through the legacy she left behind. Because Ingrid Line will never be just another victim. She will always be a mother, a healer, a daughter, a friend, a woman who lived life large, and who, even in death, continues to save lives by teaching us what warning signs look like, by showing us that evil often wears a charming smile, and by reminding us that the most dangerous predator is the one sitting right beside you, looking exactly like everyone else. Rest in peace, Ingrid Line. August 2, 1975 to April 8, 2016. Devoted mother, daughter, friend, and healer. Gone but never forgotten.
And I'm Lisa Balick, and this is The 10. A local nurse and newlywed missing since Wednesday has been found dead. A man who was her neighbor is behind bars. KOIN 6's Ariel Salk joins us live from Beaverton outside the apartment complex where the 2 of them lived. Ariel?
The Beaverton police have arrested 27-year-old Bryce Jonathan Schubert, charging him with murdering Melissa Jubain. They have also confirmed that they have located her remains.
It seemed like she had such a beautiful life and just such great people around her.
Friends and neighbors leaving flowers and photographs in memory of Melissa Jubain after Beaverton police found her remains and arrested a neighbor in her Beaverton apartment building, 27-year-old Bryce Jonathan Schubert.
September 7th, 2024, 3:02 a.m. Beaverton police made an announcement that would shatter a community. A bride of just 13 days had vanished from inside her own locked apartment. But what investigators discovered would reveal that the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers in the night. It comes from the person living right next door. Welcome to True Crime Minds Studio. Tonight, we explore a horror so sinister it'll be etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. Now, let's get into it, because what you're about to hear isn't just about a murder. It's about the 13 days between a wedding ceremony and a funeral. August 25th, 2024. 32-year-old Melissa Jubain married Brian Lantero, her partner of 10 years, in Paradise, Waimea Valley, Hawaii. Friends and family watched as 2 people who had spent a decade traveling back and forth between Hawaii and Oregon finally became husband and wife. It was supposed to be the beginning of their forever. She had less than 2 weeks left to live, and the person who would take everything from her was already waiting in the apartment. right next door. But before we meet the monster behind that door, you need to understand who Melissa really was. Because what makes this case truly terrifying isn't just how she died, it's how much she had to live for, and how quickly it was all ripped away. To understand the horror of what happened on September 4th, you need to know this. Melissa Jubain was the kind of person who never broke a promise. Not to her patients, not to her colleagues, not to anyone. As a cardiac nurse at Providence St. Vincent Medical Center in Portland, Melissa didn't just save lives. She was the person you prayed would be in the room when your heart stopped beating. She was exceptional. The kind of nurse who showed up early and stayed late, who remembered every patient's name, who never, ever failed to show up for her shift. Until September 4th, 2024. When Melissa didn't report for her morning shift, the worry was immediate. This wasn't tardiness. This wasn't a miscommunication. Something was catastrophically wrong. At 10:18 a.m., Beaverton police received a welfare check request. Officers rushed to her apartment at 1050 Southwest 160th Avenue, met by apartment staff in growing dread. They entered her apartment, and what they found was nothing. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, no broken windows or kicked-in doors. Her belongings sat exactly where she'd left them. Her car was in the parking lot. But Melissa was gone. Her phone turned off, bank accounts, no activity, credit cards, not a single transaction. It was as if she had simply evaporated from inside her own locked apartment. By Friday, September 6th, the community mobilized. Hundreds of volunteers flooded the area with flashlights and hope, searching parks, trails, dumpsters, anywhere Melissa might be. Her new husband, Brian, flew in from Hawaii. His honeymoon joy turned to absolute nightmare. But while hundreds of people searched through the night, calling her name, desperately hoping to find her alive, there was someone who didn't join the search. Someone who stayed quietly in his apartment, just feet from where Melissa had last been seen alive. 27-year-old Bryce Schubert, Melissa's neighbor. While hundreds of strangers searched for a woman they'd never met, risking everything to bring her home, Bryce Schubert already knew exactly where she was, because he's the one who put her there. And what he did to her in those final hours would make even the most hardened investigators wish they'd never seen the evidence. What happened in the next 60 seconds would transform this from a missing person case into a murder investigation so disturbing, so brutal, that it would make national headlines and haunt a community forever. September 7th, 2024, 3:02 in the morning. While most of Beaverton slept, police made an announcement that would send shockwaves across the nation. They had found Melissa Jubain's remains, and they had arrested Bryce Schubert for her murder. But here's what made investigators' blood run cold: the proximity. Melissa lived in apartment 1050. Schubert lived in the same building, same floor, just doors away. How close were they? Close enough that he could hear when she came home from work. Close enough to know her schedule. Close enough to track when she left for her shifts. Close enough to know exactly when her new husband was thousands of miles away in Hawaii. Close enough to know when she'd be completely alone. But the arrest was just the beginning. Because what police found during their investigation, what Bryce Schubert did to Melissa in her final moments, what he did to her body after death. Even seasoned homicide detectives, men and women who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer, struggled to put it into words. Some couldn't sleep for weeks after seeing the evidence. For 6 weeks, Melissa's family lived in agony, knowing she was dead, but not knowing the full horror of what happened to her. Then, in October 2024, prosecutors filed a document that would haunt everyone who read it. A document that would reveal the true monster living in apartment 1050. The filing described what they called sentence enhancement factors, legal language for something that defies human comprehension. Prosecutors stated that Bryce Schubert had been deliberately cruel in Melissa's final moments. He had used a weapon. He had posed a threat of actual violence that resulted in permanent injury to Melissa before she died. The prosecution made clear the degree of harm was significantly greater than typical for such an offense, but it didn't end with her death. Schubert was also charged with abuse of a corpse, meaning after he killed her, after he watched the life drain from her eyes, after he took everything from her, he did something else, something to her body, something so disturbing, so depraved that prosecutors believed he could never, ever be rehabilitated, that he would kill again if given the chance. First-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, abuse of a corpse. The woman who had just returned from her honeymoon, who was supposed to start her new life as a married woman, who saved lives for a living, had been tortured, killed, and desecrated by the man who lived right next door. But here's the detail that made even veteran investigators go silent, the revelation that transformed this from a horrific murder into something that defied all logic and reason. Because Bryce Schubert wasn't just some random neighbor. His connection to Melissa, his background, his profession, was far more disturbing than anyone could have ever imagined. When detectives discovered who Bryce Schubert really was, what he did for a living, where he worked, the oath he had taken, the entire case took a turn into nightmare territory, because this wasn't just betrayal, it was the ultimate perversion of everything sacred in medicine. Bryce Schubert was a nurse, just like Melissa. He had worked at a different Providence hospital, the same healthcare system where Melissa saved lives every single day. He was a medical professional, someone trained to care for people, someone who had taken an oath to do no harm, the very hands that were supposed to heal, that were trained to save lives, that patients trusted with their most vulnerable moments, had committed an act so brutal that prosecutors described it as deliberately cruel. This wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. This wasn't some random attack by someone who didn't understand the value of life. Melissa and Schubert existed in the same world. They were both healthcare professionals, both dedicated to saving lives, both neighbors in the same apartment building. Did he know her? Did they pass each other in the parking lot after long shifts? Did they talk about difficult patients? Did she smile at him in the hallway, maybe complain about the weather, share small talk like normal neighbors do? Did she have any idea, any clue at all, that the man living just feet away, the fellow nurse, the person who understood her world better than almost anyone, was capable of such evil? The answer to that question might be hidden somewhere in the evidence that police found when they searched his apartment. Digital evidence, physical evidence, evidence so disturbing that even the landlord, who had seen everything in decades of property management, wanted every trace of Bryce Schubert erased from existence, wanted his apartment professionally cleaned, fumigated, exorcised of whatever evil had lived there. What investigators found in the apartment unit next to Melissa's would lead them to describe Schubert's actions as outrageous in the extreme. But that clinical legal phrase doesn't even begin to capture the horror, because what was in that apartment revealed something even more terrifying. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was planned. The landlord, Sentinel Real Estate Corporation, filed an eviction lawsuit in October 2024. The legal documents cited an act which is outrageous in the extreme. They claimed personal injury, substantial damage, and an extremely outrageous act. Whatever happened in that apartment, whatever police found, was so disturbing that the property owner wanted it gone. Erased. Forgotten. The investigation uncovered what defense attorneys called voluminous and complicated digital evidence. Massive amounts of data from computers, phones, hard drives. What was on his computer? What searches had he made? What websites had he visited? Had he been researching Melissa? Stalking her digitally? Planning this for weeks? Months? The answers remained sealed in court documents, but they were disturbing enough that prosecutors made a chilling statement. They believed future efforts to rehabilitate Schubert would not be successful, that there was a need to ensure the security of the public. In other words, they believed if he ever got out, he would kill again. But while Bryce Schubert sat behind bars, believing he had silenced Melissa forever, believing her story would fade into the background noise of true crime statistics, something happened that he never expected. Something powerful. Something that would ensure the whole world knew Melissa's name and demanded justice. What started as a small vigil for one woman, lit by candles and tears, would explode into a movement that refused to be silenced. A movement that packed courtrooms, demanded answers, and made sure Melissa Jubain would never become just another forgotten victim. But what they were about to learn would break their hearts all over again. Gabriella Portland, a grassroots organization of Filipino women, made a vow. They would attend every single court appearance. They would pack every courtroom. They would hold signs. They would chant. They would make sure that when Bryce Schubert appeared in court, he would see Melissa's community staring back at him, and they kept that promise. October 2024, February 2025, every hearing, every procedural appearance, dozens, then hundreds of supporters showing up, refusing to let the system forget. But then came the devastating blow that no one saw coming. February 2025, defense attorneys filed a motion to delay the trial. They cited a busy court schedule, voluminous evidence, the need for more preparation time. The trial, originally scheduled for September 2025, 1 year after Melissa's death, was pushed back. March 31st, 2026. That's when Bryce Schubert will finally stand trial for the murder of Melissa Jubain. Nearly 2 years after her death. Nearly 2 years since Brian Lantero became a newlywed and a widower in the span of just 13 days. 2 years of waiting for answers. 2 years of Melissa's family reliving that nightmare every single day. 2 years of a community demanding justice and being told to wait. And through it all, there's one truth that remains locked away in sealed court documents. One piece of information that recontextualizes everything. One reality that makes this entire tragedy even more heartbreaking. Because Melissa Jubain's final act before she died, the last thing she did in her professional life before walking home to her apartment that day, was saving someone's life. September 3rd, 2024. The day before, Melissa Jubain disappeared forever. She clocked out of her shift at Providence St. Vincent Medical Center, having just stabilized a cardiac patient who came in coding. Heart stopped, life hanging by a thread. She brought that person back. She saved a life that day. She walked out of that hospital tired but fulfilled, looking forward to building her new life with Brian. She had absolutely no idea. It would be the last life she ever saved. Providence St. Vincent released a statement after her death. They called her exceptional, committed to their mission, a daily demonstration of compassion, excellence, and integrity. But here's what they didn't say. What makes this case even more tragic? Melissa Jubain spent her entire career saving lives. She worked in cardiac care, one of the most intense, demanding specialties in nursing. When someone's heart stopped, Melissa was the person who restarted it. When someone coded, she brought them back from the edge of death. She had probably saved dozens of lives in her career, maybe hundreds. People who went home to their families, who hugged their children, who celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. Because Melissa Jubain was exceptional at her job, and yet, when her own life was in danger, when she needed someone to save her, when she was fighting for her life in those final moments, the person who should have helped, who had the same training, who took the same oath, was the one destroying her. Bryce Schubert, a fellow nurse, someone who understood exactly what he was taking away, someone who knew the value of life better than most people ever would, and he chose cruelty anyway. Which brings us to the question that haunts every true crime case, the question that keeps people awake at night, double-checking their locks, looking over their shoulders in parking lots, wondering about the stranger in the elevator, or the neighbor who smiled at them this morning. Could this happen to you? The terrifying answer is yes, because Melissa Jubain did everything right. She lived in a nice apartment complex. She had a respectable career. She was careful. She was smart. And it still wasn't enough. We like to believe we can recognize danger, that predators look a certain way, that they act suspicious, that we'd know if someone dangerous lived next door. But Bryce Schubert was a nurse, a healthcare professional with a respectable job and what appeared to be a normal life. He probably said hello to neighbors in the hallway. He probably took out his trash on schedule. He probably got his mail and went to work and did all the normal things normal people do. And the entire time, he was capable of what prosecutors called deliberate cruelty, capable of planning, capable of waiting for the perfect moment, capable of destroying a life without hesitation. Melissa Jubain had just started her new life. She had married the love of her life after a decade of long-distance devotion. She had a career dedicated to helping people. She had dreams, plans, a future stretching out before her. And in one day, possibly in one moment, all of that was stolen by someone who lived 20 feet away. But there's one thing Bryce Schubert couldn't take away. One thing he couldn't destroy, no matter how cruel he was, no matter what he did to her body, no matter how hard he tried to silence her forever. Melissa's impact on this world, the lives she saved, the patients who lived because she was there, the love she gave to everyone who knew her, the light that still shines in every person who remembers her. This is how we choose to remember Melissa Jubain, not for how she died, but for how she lived. Melissa Jubain was 32 years old. She was a daughter, a wife, a friend, a colleague, a healer. Every day, nurses like Melissa put on their scrubs and walk into hospitals to save lives. They work 12-hour shifts. They hold the hands of dying patients. They celebrate when someone pulls through against all odds. Melissa did that job with compassion, excellence, and integrity. She showed up. She cared. And in one day, possibly in one moment, all of that was stolen by someone who lived 20 feet away. She deserved to live. She deserved to grow old with Brian. She deserved to have children, to celebrate anniversaries, to save thousands more lives over a long and fulfilling career. Instead, 13 days after her wedding, her life was taken by the person next door. This is the story of Melissa Jubain, a newlywed nurse who never came home from work, and a neighbor whose cruelty shocked a nation. Thank you for watching True Crime Minds Studio. If this case impacted you, please share it to keep Melissa's memory alive. And let us know in the comments, what do you think should happen at trial? We'll be following this case closely and will update you when justice is finally served in March 2026. Until next time, stay safe. Imagine waking up one morning and the person sleeping next to you isn't who you thought they were. Not just hiding a small secret, but living an entire fake life. For years, have you ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Keep that feeling in mind. July 19th, 2004, 10:02 a.m., Salt Lake City, Utah. A frantic husband calls 911. His wife, 27-year-old Lori Hacking, never returned from her morning jog. Her car sits abandoned at Memory Grove Park. Her work clothes are laid out at home, untouched. She's 5 weeks pregnant. Within hours, the case makes international headlines. A city still haunted by the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping 2 years earlier holds its breath. But no one could have imagined what investigators were about to uncover. Not a random abduction, not a tragic accident, something far more sinister. A double life, years of elaborate deception, and a husband who wasn't who anyone thought he was. But here's what will shock you most, and we'll get to this later. Lori actually discovered the truth days before she vanished. What she did with that information? That's the part that changes everything. This is the story of Lori Soares hacking. Welcome to True Crime Mind Studio. Tonight, we explore a horror so sinister, it's etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. We've all seen couples like this, the ones who seem to have it all figured out. Picture perfect on social media, always smiling, always succeeding. But here's the question: how well do you really know the people closest to you? To understand what happened on that July morning, we need to go back to the beginning. Lori Soares and Mark Hacking were the definition of high school sweethearts. They met young, fell in love, and built what everyone around them believed was the perfect life together. By 2004, they'd been married for 5 years. Lori worked as a stockbroker's assistant at Wells Fargo, beloved by her colleagues. She was smart, driven, with plans to pursue her MBA. Friends described her as radiant, always positive, the kind of person who lit up every room. Mark appeared equally successful. He'd just completed his master's degree in psychology from the University of Utah. His father was a pediatrician. His brother, a doctor. Another brother, an electrical engineer. Mark was following in the family footsteps, accepted into medical school at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill to study oncology. Their entire apartment was packed. Moving boxes stacked against walls. Their future stretched out before them like a golden road. 3 days before Lori vanished, they'd celebrated at a going-away party at a mountain cabin owned by Lori's boss. Friends recalled the couple seemed happy, excited, inseparable. Lori had even sent Mark flowers at work recently. She called him my big old teddy bear. Her mother would later tell investigators they had a great relationship. Mark adored her. And there was more. Lori was 5 weeks pregnant. According to everyone who knew her, she was overjoyed. The baby, the move to North Carolina, medical school, the life they'd built together, everything was finally falling into place. Or so everyone thought. What Mark was hiding would destroy all of it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The morning of July 19th started like any other Monday. Lori had planned to wake at 5 a.m., go for her regular run at Memory Grove, a popular trail area in Salt Lake City. She'd return home, shower, get ready, and Mark would drive her to work at 7 a.m. But when Mark woke at 8 a.m., Lori was already gone. So was her car. He assumed she'd let him sleep in and driven herself to work. Nothing seemed unusual. Mark went about his morning. He played Nintendo. Around 9 a.m., he left the apartment and purchased something they'd been shopping for. A new mattress. Remember that detail. It's going to become very important. He returned home, put the mattress on the bed, and started putting fresh sheets on it. Then, at 10 a.m., he called Lori's work. That's when everything changed. In the call that would later be scrutinized by investigators, Mark spoke with Lori's coworker. The conversation went normally at first, until the coworker said something that made Mark's blood run cold. The coworker asked, "Is Lori okay?" Mark said he didn't know what he meant. That's when he learned Lori never arrived at work. Mark's response was immediate. He told the coworker, "Oh my heck, here's her clothes." She never came back from running. The workout clothes Lori had laid out the night before were still there, untouched. At 10:02 a.m., Mark called 911. The desk sergeant told him he had to wait 24 hours to file a missing person report. Mark couldn't wait. He drove to Memory Grove himself. When he arrived, he found Lori's car exactly where she usually parked it before her runs. The vehicle appeared undisturbed. Her keys, her purse, her wallet, everything was still inside, but there was no sign of Lori anywhere. Now ask yourself, what would you have done in Mark's position if you really didn't know what happened to your spouse? Keep that in mind as this story unfolds. By the time police arrived at Memory Grove, Lori's co-workers and family members had already begun searching. When officers interviewed Mark, they noted he was extremely upset. At one point, he became so overwhelmed he fell backward against Lori's car, struggling to keep his composure. He explained to officers that Lori always ran along the roadway when she was alone, only veering off the path if she had a companion for safety. He'd already run her normal route himself, looking for any sign of her. That's why his shoes were wet when police arrived. He'd crossed the creek during his search. Or at least, that's what he said. Salt Lake City was still traumatized by what happened to Elizabeth Smart. The 14-year-old had been kidnapped from her bedroom just 2 years earlier. The city hadn't forgotten. That fear was still fresh, still raw. Within hours, K-9 units and helicopters were deployed. Volunteers combed the area. Flyers went up across the city with Lori's photo. Then disturbing reports started coming in. Several women came forward describing unsettling interactions with suspicious men in Memory Grove in recent weeks. The theory quickly formed. Lori had been kidnapped while jogging, just like Elizabeth Smart. But there was a problem. A neighbor who lived near Mark and Lori's apartment came forward with a statement that didn't make sense. This neighbor said she saw Lori's car parked in front of their building at 7 a.m. When she left her house again at 8:30 a.m., it was still there. But Mark said the car was gone when he woke at 8 a.m. He assumed Lori had driven herself to work. So how did the car end up at Memory Grove? We'll come back to that. But first you need to understand just how strange Mark's behavior was becoming. In any missing person case, the spouse is always the first suspect. It's just statistics. We've all seen it play out before, but Mark seemed like an unlikely candidate. He appeared genuinely distraught. His family loved him. Everyone who knew the couple said they were happy, deeply in love. Still, investigators began noticing things, small things, things that didn't quite fit. The mattress, for one. Think about this for a second. Mark had purchased a new mattress between 9 and 10 a.m. that morning before he even knew Lori was missing. When asked about it later, he explained casually that they'd been shopping for one for the move. But why that specific morning? Why the urgency? Comment below. Is buying a mattress on the same morning your wife disappears suspicious or just unfortunate timing? Then there was Mark's behavior on the ride to the police station for his initial interview. He made an odd comment to the officer driving him. He said, "Lori is going to be so pissed at me when you guys find her." The officer asked what he meant. Mark replied, "She'll be so mad at me because I didn't go running with her." At the station, Mark agreed to tell his story on record. He seemed cooperative, helpful, though noticeably anxious. When investigators suggested he take a CVSA test, a computer voice stress analysis meant to detect deception, Mark hesitated. The exchange was telling. Mark said, "I do feel coerced into taking this." The investigator responded, "Nobody's making you take this test. If you don't want to, you can walk right out that door." Mark replied, "And if I refuse, then of course that makes me look guilty." The investigator said, "It's not admissible in court anyway. We trust the machine. The courts just don't." Mark responded, "But at the same time, I've got these circumstances that look bad. So I feel like if I don't take this, I'm just going to be drilled. I don't think I want to take it." He refused the test. What would you have done? Take the test to clear your name, or refuse on principle? Later that afternoon, police were dispatched to examine the dumpster outside Mark and Lori's apartment building. Mark's brother showed up and asked why police were there. Mark's response: "Apparently they're nervous that I bought a new mattress." Then he added, "I just need to get away." Officers searched the dumpster but found nothing. Then came the incident that changed everything. And trust me, you won't believe this part. At 2 a.m. on July 20th, less than 24 hours after Lori vanished, police received a bizarre call from a hotel about half a mile from the couple's apartment. Mark had checked into the hotel instead of staying at home. Staff found him running through the hallways completely naked except for a pair of sandals. His brother Scott rushed to the hotel. There, he found a message written on Mark's PDA, a handheld computer device. The message read, "To everyone from Mark, this is justice. I'm so sorry." Mark's family immediately checked him into a psychiatric unit. Years later, FBI profiler Candace DeLong would comment on this incident with a chilling observation. "He kept his shoes on, his sandals. That's not generally something we see in someone truly psychotic." Was Mark really having a breakdown? Or was he trying to play crazy? Some say it was a calculated move to avoid interrogation. Others believe he genuinely snapped under pressure. What do you think? Drop your theory in the comments. While Mark was in the psychiatric unit, investigators began digging deeper into his life. And what they found? It's one of the most elaborate webs of deception I've ever covered on this channel. Mark Hacking had been living a double life. Not for months, for years. The first crack appeared when someone called the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill. Despite the couple's imminent move, despite Mark supposedly being accepted into their medical school program, there was no record of Mark Hacking anywhere in their system. None. Zero. He'd never been accepted. In fact, he'd never even applied. Let that sink in. This man had packed up his entire life, thrown his wife a going-away party, and was preparing to move across the country for a school that didn't even know he existed. But it got worse. Mark had actually traveled across the country to attend fake interviews at multiple medical schools. He'd returned home with stories about the campuses, the professors, the programs, all fabricated. Imagine the level of commitment it takes to pull that off. The planning, the details, the lies upon lies. And the lies went deeper still. Mark hadn't just failed to get into medical school. He'd never even graduated from the University of Utah. He'd dropped out years earlier. All those textbooks spread around their apartment? Props? The term papers he'd asked Lori's mother to help him write? Part of an elaborate performance. When he told his wife, his family, his friends that he was going to class, he was actually spending time at a neighborhood convenience store, drinking soda, eating hot dogs, and smoking cigarettes. He'd told the store employees he was a therapist and begged them to keep his smoking habits secret from Lori. They were members of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Smoking was forbidden. There was more. Mark had told Lori's mother he worked at the Neuropsychiatric Institute at the University of Utah, running therapy sessions. The truth? He worked as a licensed healthcare assistant and hospital orderly, conducting group activities. Not therapy. Not even close. Hospital officials revealed something even stranger. At work, Mark wore a name tag that read Franz. It wasn't officially issued. He'd chosen the name from a Saturday Night Live sketch about narcissistic bodybuilders. He was literally living as someone else. Can you imagine living with someone for 5 years and not knowing any of this? Comment yes if you think you would have noticed the signs. The revelation shocked both families. Mark's own father told the press, "We didn't see it coming. We got completely blindsided by it." People began speculating about why. Mark came from a family of high achievers. His father, a pediatrician, one brother, a doctor, another, an electrical engineer. Maybe the pressure was too much. Maybe Mark felt he could never measure up. So, he created a version of himself that could. Mark later tried to explain to his family that he'd only misled people because it was a little lie that snowballed out of control. A little lie. But investigators had stopped focusing on Mark's lies about his education. They were focusing on something else entirely. What happened to Lori? And here's where we come back to what I mentioned at the beginning. Remember when I said Lori discovered the truth days before she vanished? This is that moment. While the lies about medical school were shocking, they raised an even more disturbing question. Did Lori know? The answer came from Lori's co-workers. On Friday, July 16th, just 3 days before she vanished, Lori had been left in tears at work. She'd called the financial aid office at UNC Chapel Hill to make arrangements for Mark's medical school. That's when a school administrator told her there was no record of Mark being enrolled. Imagine that phone call. Imagine everything you thought you knew about your life crumbling in an instant. The administrator put Lori on hold and contacted the American Medical College Application Service. They confirmed it. Mark hadn't even applied. Lori left work early, devastated. But here's what's remarkable. That same evening, she attended their going-away party with Mark as though nothing had happened. Why? Because Mark had lied to her. Again. He told Lori he'd spoken to the same administrator and there had been a mistake with the incoming student list on the computer. Everything was fine. Nothing to worry about. And here's the heartbreaking part. Lori wanted to believe him. She called the school back and left a voicemail saying Mark had straightened everything out. But in her message, you can hear the doubt. She said she wanted the administrator to call her back and let her know everything was okay. Not that she doesn't trust her husband, but for her own peace of mind. What would you have done in her shoes? Confronted him immediately? Or given him the benefit of the doubt? Tell me in the comments. That voicemail wouldn't be heard until Monday. By then, Lori was already missing. Investigators began piecing together what really happened. They re-examined Lori's car. The seat and mirrors had been adjusted for someone much taller than Lori, who was 5'3" and 115 pounds. She wasn't the last person to drive it. Then they found blood in the back seat, a blood transfer stain, which happens when wet blood from one object touches another. With Mark's permission, investigators searched the apartment more thoroughly. They found Lori's purse, her keys, her wallet, all the things she would have needed for her run, all still at home. She never left. In the bedroom, they found spots of blood on the headboard, more on the nightstand. Then, an officer opened the nightstand drawer and found something chilling. We'll get to what it was in just a moment. But first, investigators made another discovery that would blow the case wide open. They headed to the church Mark attended and searched the dumpster there. Inside, they found an old, used mattress. The top portion had been cut out and was missing. Now that mattress purchase makes sense, doesn't it? When confronted, Mark had an explanation. He and Lori had thrown it out because she'd had a heavy menstrual cycle and bled on it. But why throw it in the church dumpster instead of the one at their apartment? Mark didn't answer that. Back to the nightstand. The officer opened it during the search, and Mark was standing right there. Inside was a sheathed knife. Mark, who was present during the search, chuckled nervously. He explained he'd had the knife since he was a scout. The officer examined it closer. There appeared to be a spot of blood on the blade and a fingerprint. Police immediately sought a warrant for a more thorough search and asked Mark to leave, but they still needed more pieces of the puzzle. Then investigators pulled surveillance footage from a convenience store near the couple's apartment. The last confirmed sighting of Lori was Sunday evening, July 18th. She and Mark were seen together. Everything appeared normal, but Mark was seen again at 1:30 a.m. on Monday morning, the night she vanished. This time, alone, buying cigarettes. In the footage, he can be seen examining his hands, his fingernails, checking his watch. Was he looking for blood? Two neighbors came forward with chilling statements. One heard loud screams coming from the apartment around midnight on the 18th. Another heard a male voice shouting, "This is it! It's all over! That's it!" The timeline was clear now. Lori never went for a run on Monday morning. She never made it out of her bedroom. On July 24th, 5 days after Lori vanished, Mark's father and brothers confronted him. It's unclear why Mark finally broke. Maybe because his other lies had already been exposed, he knew he couldn't hold on to this one. Or maybe, after years of living a lie, he was simply tired. Mark confessed, and what he told them is absolutely chilling. He said that on the evening of July 18th, Lori confronted him about everything. The lies, medical school, the move that was never going to happen. Years of deception. According to Mark, they argued. Lori eventually went to bed around 11 p.m. Mark said he stayed up for about an hour, playing video games. Then he went through their packed belongings until he found his .22 rifle. He walked into the bedroom and shot Lori in the head while she slept. She was 5 weeks pregnant. Systematically, Mark disposed of her body, the murder weapon, and the bloody mattress by depositing them in different dumpsters around the city. He purchased a new mattress the next morning, likely hoping no one would notice the old one was missing. Then, he staged Lori's disappearance, her car at Memory Grove, the frantic 911 call, the devastated husband searching for his missing wife. All of it was theater. Now here's where people are divided, and I want to hear from you. Some say Mark killed Lori because he couldn't face the humiliation of his lies being exposed. Others argue it was pure narcissistic rage at being caught. A few even claim he panicked and it wasn't premeditated. What do you think? Was this calculated murder or a moment of rage? Comment your verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder or something less? Lori's relatives soon spoke publicly, asking volunteers to give up the search. Mark was arrested on August 2, 2004, on suspicion of aggravated murder. But there was still one crucial piece missing: Lori's body. For months, investigators searched the Salt Lake City landfill with cadaver dogs. On October 1st, nearly 3 months after she vanished, they found Lori's remains. Her body was so badly decomposed they couldn't confirm whether she'd been pregnant at the time of death. Mark Hacking was sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. Let me repeat that. 6 years to life. For murdering his pregnant wife. The sentence shocked many. It seemed too lenient for such a horrific crime. Comment below if you think justice was served. Public outcry was immediate. The Utah Board of Pardons and Parole held a hearing to reevaluate Mark's sentencing and decided he wouldn't be eligible for parole until 2035. Following this case, Utah changed its sentencing guidelines for aggravated murder from 6 years to life to 15 years to life. The law change became known as Lori's Law. Lori's father eventually had the name Hacking removed from her headstone, leaving only her maiden name, Sories. Even from prison, Mark's disturbing behavior continued. He was caught signing and sending autographs for a website specializing in murder memorabilia. After being discovered, he agreed to stop. He also wrote his life history, which has yet to be published. But Mark Hacking isn't what we should remember about this case. We should remember Lori, a woman who dreamed of getting her MBA, who was excited about becoming a mother, who loved her job and was loved by everyone who knew her. A woman her brother said would have forgiven Mark if he'd just been honest. If he'd just done his best. He said he didn't have to be a doctor, a president, whatever it was. As long as he was doing his best, she would have loved him. In the couple's spare bedroom, investigators found a typewritten note believed to be written by Lori. The exact date is unknown. It read, "I want to grow old with you, but I can't do it under these conditions. I can't imagine life with you if things don't change." She deserved the chance to grow old. She deserved the life she'd dreamed of. She deserved better than the man she called my big old teddy bear, and he killed her for it. Before you go, let me ask you this. Have you ever known someone living a double life? Maybe not as extreme as Mark, but someone whose reality didn't match their image? We've all encountered people like this. It's more common than you think. If this case affected you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into cases like this. And tell me in the comments, what shocked you most about this case? Because we need to keep talking about cases like Lori's. Not to glorify the killer, but to remember the victims, to honor their stories, to make sure they're never forgotten. Rest in peace, Lori Soares.